This story begins with a terrifying truth I've been dealing with for over a week. There is a dead body in my basement. It all started when I went down to the basement to do a load of dirty laundry. The moment I flipped the light switch, I was horrified to find a man dressed in a suit and tie lying face up in the middle of the floor. His hands were clasped together like he was praying, and there was a wound on his chest with a pool of blood spreading out. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the motionless man. It took about 10 minutes before my brain started working again. At first, I had this fantasy that it was just some kind of elaborate Halloween prank. I truly wished that were the case, but there was no one else around. When reality finally hit me, I froze up again. A few minutes passed, and I managed to regain a tiny bit of composure. Gathering all the courage I had left, I went and grabbed a hammer from the utility room behind the stairs. I returned, and my heart dropped once more when I saw that his eyes were wide open. I stood there for a few more minutes, wondering what to do next. Then I decided I had to check if he had any ID on him. So, I took a deep breath and started going through his pants pockets. After about a minute of searching, I finally found his wallet. Just as I was checking the contents of the wallet, the light flickered and went out. The basement was completely dark. And then, a cold hand clamped down on my wrist and started squeezing tight. My panic increased tenfold. I actually wet myself. I couldn't control it. I tried desperately to breathe, but still nearly passed out. Then, a second hand locked onto my other arm. I started screaming like a trapped animal. I thrashed around, kicking and punching wildly, trying to defend myself. Then, the person tried to pull me closer. I was going absolutely nuts, struggling backward and kicking non-stop. I reached behind me, hoping to find something to grab, and my hand hit the hammer. It took a moment of fumbling in the dark before I could grab hold of it. Something inside me took over, like I switched to autopilot. I started swinging the hammer hard, and the hand finally loosened its grip on my arm. Suddenly the lights came back on, and a horrifying sight appeared before me. The man was sprawled out, his head twisted awkwardly to the side. His face and neck were covered in deep gashes, and one eye socket was completely smashed. I was paralyzed, and the hammer dropped from my hand. I realized I had killed him. I didn't mean to, it was pure panic. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I was consumed by a single feeling, guilt. There are no words to describe the panic and torment that was choking me right then. I had become a killer. I left the basement, locked the door tight, and dragged a table and shelves in front of it to block the entrance. That's when I realized how much danger I was in. If I called the police, they would know I killed the man. A jail cell is the last place on earth I want to visit. The man has been down in the basement for a week now. There hasn't been a single news report about a missing man, so I figure he has no family. I'm thinking I have to get rid of the body. Thank goodness. I don't think I could keep pretending everything was normal if the police came knocking. This last week has truly been hell. The awful memory of smashing his head with the hammer keeps haunting me like a dripping faucet. I went to the hardware store and bought a handsaw, some large trash bags, black duct tape, and a protective suit. That's everything I need to execute my plan. It might take all night, but I shouldn't run into any major problems. I also searched online, which gave me a few ideas on how to dispose of the evidence, but I won't share those details. If everything goes according to this plan, I can get away with it, and over time, it will all fade away. That is the chilling story I read from the diary after I moved into this new house. I'm Alex, and I've been in this new house for 3 days and found the diary in the bedroom. I haven't been down to the basement yet. I haven't even checked or cleaned the entire house. I don't know if what's written in this diary is real or just a cruel joke. Either way, I'm absolutely terrified about finding out. What should I do now? I am seriously thinking about moving out immediately.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories. My name is Richard Brown. I am 45 years old now. When you reach middle age, you realize that some things you thought were forgotten are actually still right there, buried deep inside. There are mistakes that can't be erased, even if you spend your entire youth paying for them. And there is one person I still love deeply, even after being apart for 15 years. I moved back to this town after 15 years away. It all started when I stumbled upon the Instagram account of the woman I loved most, Elisa. My heart raced when I saw her picture. Elisa was just as beautiful as ever. I looked through all her posts and discovered she had never married. A crazy spark of hope lit up in my mind. Maybe she's still waiting for me. I didn't rush to see her right away. I returned like a stranger, quietly hanging out at old familiar street corners to gather news. I patiently waited for the perfect chance to approach her naturally. The first day I saw her again at a coffee shop, I was as nervous as a 19-year-old boy. After hesitating for a while, I gathered all my courage to walk up and start a conversation. But Elisa reacted with a look of total strangeness, which left me feeling completely crushed. Maybe time had changed my appearance too much. I realized I wasn't the handsome guy I used to be. I was wrinkled and my skin had grown dark. But my feelings for her hadn't changed for a single second. Seeing Elisa's confusion as she walked away only made me more determined to make her recognize me. That night, I went to Elisa's house. In my coat pocket was a silver necklace, a keepsake of our love that I had held onto for 15 years. When Elisa opened the door, the hallway light spilled out, showing her guarded expression. "Elisa, it's me," I whispered, holding the necklace out into the light. The silence that followed was suffocating. I saw Elisa's pupils shrink and her lips began to tremble violently. Then she gasped the name I had been longing to hear from her lips for so long. "Richard Brown?" I tried to step forward, wanting to hug her and make up for 15 years of being apart. But Elisa suddenly backed away as if she were looking at a monster that had just crawled out of the mud. There was no warmth, no happy tears. There was only pure horror and intense rage. "How dare you show your face here?" Elisa screamed. "You ruined my life! You took everything from me! Get out before I call the police!" I stood there frozen, my head spinning. Ruined? But I loved her. I had sacrificed my entire youth for this love. While I was stuttering, trying to explain, Elisa backed into the house and grabbed the phone. "Please, there's a murderer at my house. Get here now!" I was stunned. Elisa had just called me a murderer. What could I have possibly done to deserve this much hate? The door slammed in my face. In a moment of pure desperation, I couldn't accept being cast away like a leper. I broke through the door, only wanting to hold her, to make her understand how much I had missed her. But Elisa panicked and ran toward the kitchen. I caught up and tried to grab her, and we began to struggle. In the chaos, she slipped on the tile floor. Her head hit the edge of the stone counter with a sickening thud, and she collapsed. Blood began to spread across the floor. I stood there, paralyzed. Elisa lay motionless in a pool of blood, the flickering kitchen light hitting her pale face. That sight was like a whirlwind that sucked me back to that haunting night years ago. The past came rushing back. It wasn't a story of a romantic, forbidden love. It was a bloody tragedy that I had painted over with the pink lies of my own denial. Back then, I was 19, poor, and full of resentment. Elisa's parents looked down on me, treating me like trash that wasn't worthy of touching their daughter's hem. That night, driven mad by longing and wounded pride, I broke into their house. Elisa's father was standing there in the dark with a gun in his hand. He gave me an ultimatum, threatening to shoot if I didn't disappear forever. In a fit of rage and fear, I lunged at him to grab the gun. A shot rang out, a fatal hit straight to his chest right in front of my eyes. When Elisa's mother ran downstairs screaming, I pushed her aside in a desperate attempt to escape. Her head hit the stone steps. Now, in this silent kitchen, Elisa lay still in the exact same way. The scene was a perfect, horrible copy of the tragedy from years ago. I wasn't the victim of a sad breakup. I was the monster who turned the life of the woman I loved into ashes. 15 years in prison wasn't the price I paid to come back and love her. It was the punishment for wiping out her family. And yet, I had the nerve to return, carrying that blood-stained silver necklace to beg for forgiveness. The police sirens echoed in the distance, getting louder and closer. I dropped to my knees beside Elisa, my shaking hands touching her cooling skin. I thought I had come back to start over, but it turns out I only came back to finish the devil's work.
Emily stared out the window at the Appalachian Mountains, shrouded in mist. Her family had been staying at this mountain cabin for 3 weeks. The patches of eczema on her arms had faded quite a bit. When they first arrived, she really hated the place. She thought living here was like being isolated in the middle of the woods. She especially hated spending her whole summer here to treat her skin condition. Connor, Emily's 13-year-old brother, felt the same way. He constantly complained about being away from his video games and friends. But now, with only a week left before they went home, she felt a sense of loss. Emily had truly come to love the clean air and mornings filled only with bird calls instead of traffic noise. That evening, Emily's parents received a phone call that sounded very serious. The kids only saw them rush into their room to pack quickly. When they came out, their mom explained that her dad's best friend had passed away, and they had to drive down to the city that night to make it for the funeral the next morning. They would be back in just 2 days. Their mom gave Emily careful instructions about taking care of herself and looking out for her brother. To instill a sense of fear, and also as a precaution, she told the 2 kids a story. Deep in these Appalachian woods, people rumored there was a creature called Bigfoot. It wasn't just huge, it could also mimic noises and even human voices to trick people into opening their doors. Especially curious kids, she warned. So, no matter what you hear, you must not open the door. Your dad and I will open it ourselves when we get back. Emily and her brother promised they would follow their mother's instructions exactly. The first day passed by fairly peacefully, apart from Connor's usual complaints of boredom. That night, a car horn suddenly blared at midnight. It wasn't a normal honk, but a repeated, frantic-sounding blast. Emily woke up with a start. The horn kept blaring without stopping, making her both curious and scared. Connor ran into her room. "Did you hear that?" "Someone's out there." Emily motioned for him to be quiet. The 2 siblings crept down to the living room, only daring to switch on one dim light on the staircase. The horn was still sounding, seeming to come from the trail not far away, but there were no headlights, no engine noise. Connor started to move toward the door, but Emily quickly pulled him back. "Don't go out." "But what if someone needs help? Nobody's there. It's Bigfoot." Emily vividly remembered her mother's warning. Bigfoot could mimic sounds. She was sure it was using the car horn to lure them outside. The two siblings stood listening for a moment longer. The horn kept going on and on. Emily was certain no one would honk that long. Then, the horn stopped abruptly. Silence descended. The two listened for another while before heading back to their rooms to go back to sleep. Both planned to tell their parents everything as soon as they returned. The next morning, Emily prepared breakfast. She tried to call her mom, but there was no cell service. The signal was always weak here, but today she couldn't get anything at all. She couldn't call her dad either. Emily had planned to ask her parents to buy more bread because the pantry was empty. A while later, as the two siblings were watching TV in the living room, a knock suddenly came at the door. They exchanged surprised looks. Then the knocking sounded again, and a man's voice called out from outside. "Is anyone home? I'm a police officer. I need to talk to you about something important." This time, Emily again wouldn't let her brother open the door. "It's the police, Emily. It's Bigfoot. Didn't you forget what Mom warned us about?" The knock came again, a third time, longer this time. "I know you two are inside. This is about your parents." Connor jumped. He knows about Mom and Dad. Emily gripped her brother's hand tight. "Probably overheard what Mom told us. It knows they're gone. Don't believe it." The man outside continued his announcement. "Your parents were in an accident. I need to talk to you." Emily covered Connor's ears. "Don't listen. It's trying to trick us." The two siblings backed further into the room, trying to ignore it. But almost 10 minutes passed, and the knocking didn't stop. The man's voice remained patient. "Sis, what if it really is the police? What if Mom and Dad are actually in trouble?" Emily shook her head, but she herself was starting to panic. Emily walked over to the side window, trying to look out very carefully. Through a crack in the curtains, she saw a police cruiser parked in the yard. An officer stood in front of the door. Emily and her brother walked toward the main door. They stood before the door, hands on the doorknob. If it was Bigfoot, it would kill them both. But if it was the police, and her parents were really in danger? "You don't need to be afraid. I'm Officer Kevin. I just need to confirm your parents' identities." While Emily was still hesitating, Connor pushed his sister aside and decisively opened the door. Emily tried to stop him, but it was too late. A police officer stood there, looking at the siblings with sad eyes. He sighed softly. "Your parents are Robert and Susan Taylor, correct?" Emily nodded, her heart starting to race. "This morning, we found a car that had gone off a cliff. The license plate matches your parents' car. The two people inside did not survive." Time seemed to stop. Emily heard the words, but her brain couldn't process them. Connor clutched his sister's sleeve tightly. The officer continued, his voice slow and clear. "The accident happened about 1 o'clock last night. The car lost control and plunged into the ravine. 1 o'clock last night." Emily remembered the repeated car horn the two siblings had distinctly heard. So it wasn't Bigfoot. It wasn't the monster. It was Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad were trying to call for help. Emily burst into tears. Emily blamed herself. If the two of them had gone out to check, or quickly called the police, instead of just standing there listening, then her parents might have been saved. Emily thought she was so stupid. She was 15 years old. Why didn't she know how to handle something like this? Connor was wailing loudly. Emily was stunned. She just stared out at the Appalachian Mountains. Beautiful and brutal mountains. Her mother had told the story about Bigfoot to protect them, but that very story had killed two people. There was no monster. Only fear had just stolen Emily's and her brother's parents. I am Elias, and I had just moved into a house in the suburbs of Oregon. I did a quick cleanup and planned to buy some basic necessities for the new place, but after a walkthrough, I was quite impressed. The previous owner seemed to have left almost everything, from the dishware on the kitchen shelf to the oak desk in the reading room. I thought I wouldn't have to spend much. Everything was so easy. When I reached the end of the hallway, I found the door leading to the basement was locked. A piece of paper was taped to it, cautioning me to be careful when going down because it's damp and not clean. I accepted this. I had no plans for that dark cellar anyway. While cleaning up, I was suddenly struck by the existence of a fabric-covered sofa in the living room. It was too old and outdated, completely out of place with the modern feel of the rest of the house. As I got closer, I began to notice a strange smell coming from the couch. At first, I thought it was the scent of old, damp fabric, but the odor became clearer and more unpleasant. It was slightly fishy, but mixed with a strong fragrance, like perfume or cosmetics. An odd combination. I decided I needed to call a professional cleaning service, but first, I would try to deodorize it myself. I opened the drawer of a nearby cabinet to look for air freshener. There was no air freshener. Instead, there were strange items: a small knife, a large roll of duct tape, and a pair of medical rubber gloves. I froze. I remembered these items hadn't been there when I cleaned before, but I wasn't entirely sure. I've been quite forgetful lately. I took the items out of the drawer, intending to deal with them later. I returned to examine the sofa more closely. Looking carefully between the worn cushions, I began to find personal items: a silver women's watch, a few hair ties, an earring, and long blonde strands of hair. Definitely not mine. I flipped the cushion completely and found a notebook. It was a journal, filled with messy handwriting. I took it to another place, where I couldn't smell that disturbing odor, to read. The initial content was a description of a girl named Elle. The journal's author described her as having an attractive figure, a charming way of speaking, golden blonde hair, and a radiant smile. But the tone quickly turned into that of a stalker. The notes were morbidly detailed about her schedule: which coffee shop Lila went to at what time, what kind of coffee she liked, what kind of car she drove, what time she returned home, and a chilling emphasis that she never locks the back gate. Finally, a line written in thick red ink on the last page sent a chill down my spine. No one has seen her since Tuesday. They are putting up posters, but I know where she is. I sat in silence. A terrible suspicion flared up. Lila had been kidnapped, quite possibly by the person who wrote this journal. Horribly, she might still be held captive or dead, and the sofa in my house might very well be where the crime took place. I glanced toward the couch. Suddenly, a terrible headache hit me. My heart pounded furiously. My chest felt like it was about to explode, and cold sweat poured out. I had to grab the wall to keep from falling. I staggered toward the window, opening it to breathe the cold air. In the reflective glass, I saw my own face smiling. She thought she could run. How adorable. I spun my head around, my gaze slowly sweeping toward the small hallway, which led to the old, locked basement door. Today is Saturday. She's been down there for 5 days. The headache returned, stronger this time, more violent, as if two brains were fighting inside my skull. I screamed, clutching my head. A few seconds later, the pain subsided. The initial fear and horror returned. amplified tenfold. And then, chilling fragments of memory flooded back. Not the memories of Elias who just moved, but of someone else. I looked down at my hands holding the journal. I recognized the handwriting. It was all my handwriting, but with a different name, Agan. I looked at the basement door where I knew Lila's body lay. A cold shiver ran down my spine. No, it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. It was 2014. I was in my final semester at the University of Louisiana. Winter here isn't bitterly cold like in the north, but it carries a damp chill. During a career fair, I met Rachel. She was also a senior student with chestnut hair and a radiant smile. Our relationship developed naturally, became serious, and just 2 years later, we had a simple yet warm wedding. Rachel became pregnant soon after. When our first daughter was born, I had a stable, well-paying job in finance, enough for Rachel to fulfill her dream of being a full-time mom and taking care of our home. A few years passed, and our little home welcomed a new member, a handsome baby boy. I loved my children immensely, enjoying every moment of watching them grow up. I cherished every second of that happiness and believed I had a stable and fulfilling life. One cold Saturday afternoon, I was lying on the sofa, covered with a light blanket, watching a football game on TV. As I drifted off, my eyes suddenly fixed on a red indicator light blinking from the Wi-Fi router in the corner of the room. The strange thing was that the light was inexplicably blurry and distorted, while every other object in the room was clear and sharp. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but the light still looked extremely weird. Its shape was even inverted compared to reality. I told myself I was too tired after a long work week. I didn't mention anything to my wife and children when they came home that afternoon. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sneaked down to the living room. Like a hypnotized man, I sat for hours on the sofa, staring intently at that tiny red light. Its mysterious feeling captivated me in a sickly way. The next morning, Rachel found me slumped on the sofa. She shook me awake with a worried look, but I just said I didn't feel well and decided to take the day off work. I continued to do the same thing, sitting motionless, not going to work, not showering, not eating, just fixated on that red light. My obsession grew exponentially. In my mind, the light was no longer a small dot. It gradually swelled, taking up the entire room, emitting a dazzling, intense red glow, like a door sucking everything in. I no longer reacted to Rachel's words or touches. Her voice sounded increasingly distant. My children's laughter seemed muffled by a layer of thick water. I was almost completely absorbed by that light. Suddenly, everything shattered. I heard fierce, piercing screams and echoing voices from a very distant place. A terrifying, excruciating pain slammed into my head, throbbing and dizzying down to my bones. I opened my eyes, and a coldness instantly replaced the warmth of the sofa. I found myself lying on the cold, wet sidewalk in front of an old brick building on the University of Louisiana campus. A crowd of students and faculty members surrounded me, looking at me with expressions of confusion and pity. A tall police officer rushed over, helped me up, and guided me into his patrol car. He said I had just been attacked by a football player during a brawl, hitting my head twice and passing out. I was dazed, but my mind immediately turned to my family. I gripped the police officer's arm and urgently asked him, "Where is my wife, Rachel, and my children? Are they here?" The police officer stopped, his face full of confusion and bewilderment. He looked at me, and what he said next was one of the most impactful sentences of my life. "What are you talking about, kid? I don't see anyone, just you." Right then, the physical pain no longer mattered. My entire 10-year world just shattered. I slowly realized the painful truth that Rachel was not real. My children were not real. 10 years of my life, including the stable job, the warm home, everything did not exist. It was all just a profound hallucination, a perfect 3D image constructed while I was in a coma after that head trauma. I was still a final year student, 19 years old. I was taken to the hospital and physically recovered completely. The headache went away, but the pain in my soul did not. After being discharged, I fell into severe depression. I struggled every day to accept that my family had never existed. I missed the taste of the morning coffee Rachel used to make. I missed the feeling of my daughter's small hand clutching mine. It was all fake, but the memories and the love I felt for them were completely real. I had lived 10 years of love, and this loss is beyond words. I had to undergo intensive psychological treatment, trying to confront the biggest loss of my life, a life that was not real, but had once been everything to me. I survived an attack, but I couldn't escape the image that attack had created. The greatest enemy is not death, but the loss of a life that never existed. I keep telling myself that, trying to find a way out of the shadow of the red light. The story above is based on a true account. Mitch, a final year student, suffered a head injury during a brawl in 2004 and fell into a coma. In this state, he lived an illusory decade with a wife and 2 children. Upon waking up, he realized it was all a delusion. Though physically recovered, Mitch sank into depression, grieving the loss of a life that never was.
I'm Maddie, 27 years old. I've been working in this local hospital for 4 years now. The work is very stressful, yet I am happy with this work. Nothing beats seeing the patients you cared for getting better. For the entire time, I had not enough time to have any attachment. My dedication all poured into my work. The job demands me to stay at the hospital in the night shifts. Each week, I generally have 2 to 3 graveyard shifts like that. It starts from 7 o'clock at night and will grind through until 7 o'clock the next morning. Yet despite the tough time, the team would help each other by further dividing the shift into smaller batches, each one covering their respective section. I have encountered many types of emergencies, and many times the patients encountered serious accidents. There was this Wednesday, when I was having a quick shut-eye. Suddenly, there was a person coming in, groaning in pain. "Please help me." I jolted back awake and jumped down to the clinic main hallway. There was a man having a lot of lacerations all over his body trotting in. He's in too much pain, I believe, screaming for help, trying to walk in. I frantically called out to other nurses and pushed out a gurney by myself. Carefully lifted the man into the bed. I reeled him into the ER room as quickly as I could. A trail of blood formed on his way to the ER. After reeling the man for a short distance, I started to realize something strange. He's very light. I could barely feel any weight, and as if I was reeling an empty gurney. Despite my initial doubt, he turned around smiling, thanking me. Meanwhile, I was so concentrated in doing first aids, asking him the questions while I'm cleaning up his wounds so I could somewhat gauging his level of consciousness. But he kept repeating whatever I'm saying with an expressionless face. Even his eyes weren't blinking at all. After cleaning his wound, I once again asked the questions so that I could write down his information for further treatments. This time he was silent, yet still smirked back at me with his expressionless face. There's little time to waste, so I told him to stay put until I came back with more help and equipment. It's a surprise for such injuries that he was still stable enough to make it to the clinic. Normally, for such injuries, people would come to the clinic with family members or good Samaritans. Or maybe he was a homeless person, for those people weren't known to gather a crowd, especially when going to get treatments. Now, after some time, I suddenly realized that I was the only one taking care of this man. My other colleagues were nowhere to be found. Other nurses and the watch doctor were not there, and despite my ceaseless pleas, they're not yet present, which prompted me to resorting to knocking on their doors to wake them up. The first one would be the ER doctor of the watch. I knocked on his door very quickly and loudly. I quickly summarized for him the situation of the patient and which room he was set down in. However, he did not open the door as I hoped he would, prompting me to slam on his door more and more. The doctor finally gave in. He walked out to greet me with an annoyed expression. I knew him. That's Dr. James, a 38-year-old veteran doctor with many years of experience under his belt. He didn't talk much, yet every time working with him, I felt very stressful. His gaze on me always frightened me, and he seemed to judge me every step of the way. I dreaded every time he grabbed onto the needles. Returning to the ER patient, I tried to report the situation to Dr. James, but instead of caring, he just sighed, as if exhausted, and just told me, "Please return to your room. Let me get other nurses to come." There's a hint of sleepiness and grogginess in his voice. "This is my watch, and it is my responsibility." His firm words shook me to my core. Why, I asked myself, why such a freaking doctor be so heartless to his own patient in such dire conditions? I returned to my quarter furious. His irresponsibility would not go unnoticed, I thought. This incident was guaranteed to be reported to head of department. I grabbed some medical equipment and quickly roused up a few nurses and technicians up to help the patient. I ran to their sleeping quarter, turning on the light and opening up the door. Everyone in the room, in stark contrast with my expectation, threw me nothing but contempt. "Get the fuck out of here, you nuthead. This is a non-authorized entry area." I was dumbfounded with their hostile attitude. I, once again, reiterated the patient's dire conditions and asking them to help. One of the nurses rudely stood up and shoved me back to the hallway before promptly slamming the door in my face. I sat alone in the dark, quiet corridor. Those cold-hearted bastards, are they even humans? No, I now knew I could no longer rely on the other nurses. I will perform the treatment myself. I quickly returned to the ER room, where the man was still waiting for treatment. The bandages on him earlier had all turned crimson red. The bed was equally smeared with blood. The iron rust smell exuded all over. Okay, massive bleeding, letter M of MARCH algorithm. Despite the amount of blood oozing out, the man still smiled at me, eyes wide opened. I managed the wound closure with the best care I could, all the while talking to the man, trying to calm him and myself down. "What's your name, sir?" I asked, and once again, he kept repeating my question like a parrot. "Okay, so how about I call you Dante?" "Dante!" He repeated the name, seemed like agreeing on my point. Dante. Dante's the name that had the root in Ecclesiarchy Latin, originating from the word durante. Duro, it means hardened and persistent. The name Dante means someone that endured many hardships, yet still held strong. It was just like this man. I could clearly feel his unbreakable spirit, clinging on despite all the pain and blood loss. I managed to handle the wounds as best as I could. Even though enduring a lot of small procedures with zero pain medication, Mr. Dante here still kept up his smile, and his eyes still opened wide, as if nothing had happened to him. After all those procedures, now it's time to get him some pain medication, some oral ones, and a shot.
By the time I had finished the shot and was about to discard the trash, suddenly, Dante laughed out loud. I turned my head around, and here I saw Mr. Dante swiveled his head at an improbable angle to look at me. Still, he gave me an expressionless smile and two eyes wide open, but at this point, it started to get more and more creepy. He laughed a lot, yet his chest was barely rising. I quickly came over to calm him down. Likely it's a state of shock. Yet as soon as I touched the man, his arm fell right off the sockets. I screamed aloud at the sight, terrified, as the bloodied arm sunk into the ground. When I looked at Dante, he still looked at me, his face frozen up in an expressionless smile. And then, when I hugged him tighter to bring him down to the bed, I could hear the bones cracking. Dante's body was slowly disintegrating, starting with the limbs and then to the head. The laughter slowly turned into a buzzing sound. His eyes, for the longest time without any noticeable blinking, completely closed off. Blood soaked out into my nurse's uniform, prompted me to just scream. It's all I could do. Everything in front of me was too surreal to even be true. Suddenly, the doors opened. Dr. James and two other nurses came in. Their faces were very serious. "Hold her down." "Hold her down," James said, ordered two nurses to hold me under while I came to get the syringe full of fluids. This was the one that had always been haunting me. Myself hopelessly struggled while the cold hard needle punctured my skin, the shearing pain raking through my body. I could feel clearly the frozen liquid coursing through my body as soon as James pulled out the syringe. A tingling numbness came suddenly, and I slowly lost my vision in a blackened blur. Then it all became pitch black. When I came back to my senses, I woke up in the same room as the last time I was there. How many days was it? I couldn't tell. On the floor was an old doll that was torn into pieces, yet still attached on one another by crudely made stitches. When I picked up the doll's head, suddenly there's a buzzing laughter, prompted me to throw it away in fear, together with a loud scream. That doll also mimicked my scream, albeit in a crude and outworldly creepy way. When I lifted my hands to cover up my face, I saw a wristband with some letter written on it. Maddie Taylor, 1997, 02, 28, number 172006, McLean Psychiatric Hospital, Belmont, Massachusetts, 02478. The door abruptly opened. Dr. James and two previous vicious nurses came over me, their eyes hawking me uncomfortably. "You better behave and keep quiet at nighttime, ma'am. There are many other patients, and they would appreciate the peace," James sternly demanded. "Wait a minute. What? So I am a patient in the mental asylum?" The dark world in my cupboard for 6 years. I was always locked in the kitchen cupboard by my parents. The first time was when I was 6 years old. I was terrified, panicking, screaming, and resisting. I'm not sure what I did wrong at that time, but I kept crying and apologizing. "I'm sorry. I ate a cookie. I'm sorry, Dad, Mom." My parents' face showed no emotion. I innocently asked them, "Why are you putting me in here?" "Well, why not?" That's a phrase that haunts me to my very core. I looked through the keyhole to catch a glimpse of the outside world. I can't remember how long I had been inside, but just as I was about to faint from exhaustion, the sound of the cupboard lock being opened echoed. My mother picked me up and placed me at the dining table. Although all I wanted at that moment was to use the restroom, I didn't dare to ask. The subsequent times I was locked in the kitchen cabinet occurred more frequently and lasted longer. I still resisted, still begged, and was filled with fear. After being released, everything went back to normal, except for being locked up. I was doing well. I was growing strong and plump, but it was only physically. A part of my soul had been worn away through those times of being locked up. The longest was 3 days when I was 7 years old. My parents locked the cupboard and went to town. By the time they returned, I felt like I was at the end of my life. Darkness, cramped space, and the smell of dampness, all of it had become incredibly familiar to me. I no longer screamed, resisted, or begged. Instead, I embraced it. I savored my own space, glancing through the keyhole to see my parents passing by occasionally. It seemed that their confinement was an attempt to make me disappear, but it only strengthened my existence even more. As my body grew, I found more comfortable positions to lie in and learned to adapt. And I realized that I enjoyed being confined. I liked the feeling of being cramped and suffocated. Once I witnessed a tense argument between my parents. They mentioned me in that argument. Mom said that because of me, she had lost many opportunities. At that time, I was already 10 years old, but I couldn't fully understand everything that was happening in that argument. But I understood that my parents didn't love me. I withdrew into myself, seeking joy in a world that was just mine. When I turned 12, my parents stopped locking me in the cupboard. I wondered, "Why don't you let me in there anymore, Mom?" "Why not?" Mom said with a gentle smile as she looked at me. I guessed it was probably because my body had grown too big for that cupboard. So I chose to lock myself in the wardrobe, under the study table, under the bed. I would crawl into all the dark, confined spaces whenever I had nothing else to do. And then I found the perfect spot, a small cupboard in my parents' room. It was half the size of a refrigerator, with a door that opened outward, located above the wardrobe. I only dared to go in there when my parents were out, timing my escape to ensure I'd be gone before they returned. One time, I fell asleep, perhaps because that secret place was just too comfortable. When I heard the sound of something breaking, I jolted awake. Peering through the crack of the door, I felt a surge of anxiety as I realized my parents had returned, but something felt off. They stood looking at each other with angry eyes. The furniture shattered on the floor, and then Dad pulled out the gun. And in a brief moment, it rendered Mom motionless on the crimson floor. Mom was staring directly at me, her eyes filled with immense pain and despair, as if she were blaming me. I wasn't sure if I could even breathe at that moment. Staying in the cupboard with my body stiff, I looked at my mother for a long time, and my father did the same, until another loud gunshot rang out, tearing through my eardrums. Dad fell down, right next to Mom. I was determined not to go outside, sitting in my own world while observing my parents' world. Until the police arrived, they found me and took me to the hospital. I remember at that time I was suffering from severe mental illness. I had completely lost all emotions towards everything around me. After 6 months in the hospital, I was taken to a children's welfare center. My life from here stepped into a new world, one filled with more emotions. I spent many years afterwards trying to escape the dark and cramped places. I even got a new name, leaving all the pain of the past behind. I always remember my parents. The last image of them is something I can never forget. That will be a memory, a sad memory, rather than an obsession within me. I can't understand why my parents treated me that way. I hope no child will ever be as unfortunate as I was back then.
I'm Ethan. I work nights at a DHL supply chain warehouse. Last year, I got into a bad car accident, messed up my car real bad and lost my full-time gig as a delivery driver. That crash didn't just take the guy crossing the street, it took my peace too. The police said it was an accident, but that didn't make me feel any better. I still hear the crash, still see the shock in the guy's eyes right before he went down. Haunts me no matter how much I want to forget. Tried taking some meds to calm me down. Worked at first, but the nightmares crept back in. Waking up gasping for air, drenched in sweat, and that constant whisper in my head. Doctor said I might have PTSD. Tried therapy for a bit, but after a few sessions, I just couldn't keep going. The past still feels like a wound that never really healed. My next job was just a way to avoid sleeping at night, better than working during the day and drowning in guilt. The warehouse is out on the edge of town, a big old building with crappy lighting on the tall shelves. About a week after I started, I heard the first weird noises, a low hum, kinda like wind blowing through, then footsteps echoing from way down the hall. Tried telling myself it was just the old vents acting up, but that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. One night I heard a whisper, real close. The voice wasn't loud, but I heard every word clear as day.
Can you see me?
I froze, gripping my flashlight tight, but when I turned around, no one was there. Told myself it was probably just my imagination, but the weird stuff didn't stop. One time, I found a dirty handprint on a shelf, smudged like someone pressed their hand there, and then vanished. One night in the security room, I was watching last week's footage and saw myself standing in the middle of the hallway. But one thing freaked me out. My shadow on the floor wasn't moving, even though I was walking. That sent chills down my spine. I replayed the video over and over, but the shadow stayed still, like it wasn't even mine. The longer I worked there, the more out of it I felt. One time, a coworker from the day shift said he saw me standing at the office door, just staring at the doorknob for ages. I didn't remember any of it. He laughed it off, trying to make it less creepy, saying, "Guess you were sleepwalking and didn't know it." But his eyes said he didn't really believe it. Sometimes, I'd find myself standing in the cold storage, holding a flashlight that wasn't even on, and I had no clue how I got there. Another time, I snapped out of it and realized I was in front of the office door, just staring at the doorknob, exactly like my coworker said. Checked the camera footage, and there I was, standing there for over 10 minutes, totally unaware. One day, while cleaning up, I found an old photo that had fallen next to a shelf. It showed a group of workers standing in front of the building on the day the warehouse opened. And right there, among the faces, I saw someone familiar, the guy I hit in the car accident last year. Flipped the photo over and the caption said, "Our first supervisor, John Harris." Chills ran down my spine when I realized my past, and this place had been connected long before I even started working here. My heart sank. How the hell could this be? I looked it up and found out he used to work here, back before the warehouse got shut down for a while after an accident. A worker died in that accident, and the place stayed closed for almost a year. I didn't know if it was just some messed up coincidence, or if I had somehow brought a piece of his past back here with me. That night, around 3 a.m., the lights in the warehouse went out. I flicked on my flashlight, but the weak beam barely lit up a few steps in front of me. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, like someone was getting closer. I swung the flashlight down the hallway, and there he was, just standing there, not moving, with his eyes glowing in the dark.
He walked toward me, not fast, but steady. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My heart just stopped cold, and in that moment, it hit me hard. He's not someone else. He's me. The way he stood, the wild look in his eyes, everything was exactly like me. I quit my job the next morning, but the nightmares didn't stop. Tried telling myself it was all in my head, just my tired, messed up mind playing tricks on me. But that next night, while I was trying to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow, heavy footsteps, the same ones I heard in the warehouse. When I walked into the kitchen, I froze. The fridge door was cracked open, and the light inside flickered, just like those busted lights back at the warehouse. A shiver ran down my spine when the door slowly closed, on its own. I don't even know what's real anymore, what's in my head and what's not. Maybe I never really escaped that accident. Maybe part of me died with that guy, and now I'm just a shadow, lost and empty.
I'm Jack, 20, living in the small town of Cedar Falls. My girlfriend Olivia and I work at Wendy's to save up for a car. We often pull the night shift because the pay is better and there are fewer customers. Olivia and I have been together for almost 2 years now. She'd always sing pop songs while wiping down tables. I loved hearing her laughter echo through the empty restaurant. Last week, my buddy Mike called to warn me about a serial killer operating in the area. He was targeting people working late at fast food joints. 3 cases had already happened in the past 2 months in neighboring towns. "Be careful, Jack. He usually attacks right before closing," Mike said over the phone. I wasn't too worried. Cedar Falls is a safe town. Tonight, Olivia felt sick and left early. I was cleaning up the restaurant alone. The clock showed 11:30 p.m. Outside, my car was the only one left in the parking lot. I was mopping the floor when my car alarm suddenly blared, piercing the quiet. I looked up and peered outside. A man was standing next to my car. He was wearing a black hoodie, his face completely obscured by the hood. I knew he was looking directly at me through the glass. I dropped the mop and walked to the door. "What are you doing?" I yelled through the glass. The man didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me. The alarm kept blaring. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but before the call could connect, the man vanished. I scanned the parking lot, but he was nowhere to be seen. The alarm stopped. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it might just be a random person who accidentally bumped into the car. I turned back to continue cleaning. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass erupted from the back of the kitchen. I froze for a few seconds, then ran towards the sound. The small back window was smashed. Glass shards were scattered all over the floor, and a cold wind continuously blew in. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer. I stepped carefully over the glass, looking out the window. Darkness enveloped the alley behind the restaurant. Trash cans were haphazardly placed, some knocked over. I turned back and saw wet footprints on the floor. The footprints led from the broken window to the dining area. My blood ran cold. He was inside. I tiptoed forward, gripping the mop handle tightly. The tables and chairs were still neat. Everything seemed normal. But I heard heavy breathing somewhere in the darkness. "I know you're there." "The police are coming," I yelled. Suddenly, a raspy chuckle echoed from behind the order counter. A man stepped out. He held a large knife in his hand, its blade stained with fresh blood. His face gradually appeared under the light. There was something both familiar and strange. Pale skin, deep sunken eyes. "I've been waiting for you." I recoiled, my hands trembling as I held the mop. "What do you want?" "Where's Olivia?" he asked, taking slow steps closer to me. My heart stopped. How did he know about my girlfriend? I stared at him, my face a mask of shock. "It's just me." The man chuckled softly. "No, she's still here." I looked at him with a skeptical gaze. my heart suddenly beating faster and stronger. I pulled out my phone and called Olivia, but the line was just a long beep without any response. Suddenly, the man burst into laughter. He pointed towards the cold storage. I followed his gaze and then ran towards it. The freezer door was slightly ajar. I trembled as I pushed the door open and saw Olivia lying on the floor, blood seeping from multiple stab wounds on her body. My eyes and mouth widened as much as they could, my body shaking uncontrollably. I knelt beside her. "Olivia! Olivia!" Rage surged through me. I turned and lunged at the man with the mop in my hand. A struggle ensued. He was stronger than I thought. Finally, I grabbed the knife and stabbed him multiple times in the chest. He collapsed, blood pooling on the floor. I sat there, gasping for breath, staring at his lifeless body for a long time. When I regained my composure, I panicked even more. I quickly ran to find my phone and called the police. 15 minutes later, police cars and an ambulance arrived. I told the whole story to Sheriff Peterson, who was an acquaintance of mine. I knew him because he used to be a friend of my dad's. "Jack, are you sure about what you just told me?" Chief Peterson asked. "Yes, Chief. He killed Olivia, and I just acted in self-defense. But when they examined the scene, nothing was as I had said. There were no signs of a broken window, no wet footprints, and most importantly, no body of the man. It was just me, a deceased Olivia, and the knife covered in my fingerprints." "Jack Morrison, you're under arrest," Chief Peterson said, his face filled with sadness. "No. Chief Peterson, you have to believe me. There was another man. He killed Olivia, but the evidence was too clear. Not only the knife and fingerprints, but the security cameras showed only Olivia and me in the restaurant. There was no one else." In the months that followed in prison, I kept repeating the story about that man. I drew his face, described him in detail to the psychiatrist. But everyone said I was hallucinating due to stress. In my cell, I looked in the mirror. A pale face, deep-set eyes, a twisted smile. It was my own face. The man I saw that night was no one else. It was me, a deranged version of myself. Memories started flooding back. I remembered the anger I felt when Olivia said she wanted to break up that night. I chased her into the walk-in freezer. I remembered the knife in my hand and her final look of terror. I sat in the corner of my cell, holding my head and weeping, not because I was wrongly convicted, but because I finally remembered who I truly was, a killer. I was on my way to a small town in Oregon, where my father had lived for over 20 years. Ahead of me was a rough road, covered on both sides by gloomy tree canopies. In the car, I felt a mix of nerves and a vague, unnameable feeling. I'm Maddie, 26 years old, and I grew up in Michigan with my mom. Mom never wanted to talk about him. All I knew was his name was David Marsh, and he lived in a small Oregon town. He had intentionally cut off all contact since I was born. I didn't believe my father didn't love me. There must have been some reason, or someone, that made him act that way. When I heard the news that he had passed away, I couldn't quite name my feelings. Probably just emptiness. Because you can't force yourself to grieve for someone you've never met. I learned that my father was alone when he died and was given the address where he lived. I decided to go there. I told Mom, and she didn't stop me. I arrived in the late afternoon. My father's house was a single-story wooden cabin, standing alone at the end of the road. The lawyer had sent me the key. I was the sole heir. Inside, the house was dark and smelled strongly of mildew. I opened the window and turned on the light to clearly see the small living room, with an old armchair, a dusty wooden table, and face-down picture frames on a shelf. I turned one over. It was a young man, probably a high school student. Written on the back of the photo was a handwritten line, "David Summer, 1985. This was my dad when he was young. Next to it was another picture, a group photo of a high school class on graduation day. I also flipped the back and was curious about the handwritten line. Marcus, I'm sorry. I started walking around. There wasn't much furniture. My father lived a minimalist, almost ascetic life. The bedroom was empty, with just a bed and a desk. The closet had a few very old clothes. On the desk, I found a dark brown leather journal, its page corners curled and yellowed. I opened the first page. The handwriting was messy. March 14th, 1998. I saw it again. Last night it stood in the corner of the room, and its face was not intact. Its mouth was wide open like it was screaming, but there was no sound. I can't sleep anymore. My hands were shaking. I flipped through the next pages. The lines were increasingly chaotic, the sentences fragmented, sometimes with very large capital letters. It still follows me. It has never gone away. I sat down on the floor and kept reading. The next pages were all ramblings about a spirit that appeared every night. My father described it in detail. It's about 5 feet tall, gaunt, with grayish skin. Its face is smashed in, with dried blood on its cheek, but I still recognize it because of those eyes. It's Marcus. I mumbled the name to myself and remembered it was written on the back of the photo. I quickly flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. About halfway through the journal, the tone suddenly changed. The writing was slower, seemingly more composed. June 22nd, 1998. I have to write it down. I have to face the truth. Marcus Hoffman. We went to the same high school in Eugene. Marcus was always the weak kid, easy to bully. And I did it. Me and my friends pushed him into lockers. We poured milk over his head in the cafeteria. We mocked him in front of the whole class. I was the one who started everything. We chased Marcus behind the school shed. I pushed him, and his head hit the step. He was bleeding a lot. We panicked and ran away. The next morning, we heard Marcus died at the hospital. The cause was a brain hemorrhage. I shook uncontrollably. I couldn't focus on any lectures that whole day. No one knew we were there. Marcus probably didn't get a chance to say anything. His family thought it was an accident and didn't ask for an investigation. Reading this, my heart was pounding hard. My hands were shaking so much, I could barely hold the journal. I looked around the dark room, suddenly feeling the air was heavy. I swallowed and read on. September 12th, 1998. It was my birthday. That day, Emily gave birth to a baby girl. We had agreed to name her Maddie. Waiting outside the delivery room, I felt like I was on fire. Until the doctor carried the baby out and loudly called out the family's name, I burst into tears. But the terrible thing is, I saw Marcus again. I saw his spirit in its most distorted and horrific state, but his eyes never changed. That look of pain, of despair, stared straight at me, then slowly turned to look at Maddie, who was still red. Then he entered her. I screamed in helplessness, and at that moment, I understood the despair Marcus felt. Desperate watching him merge into my daughter, just like he was desperate watching us leave when he was in the most pain. When Emily gave the baby to me to hold, I saw my daughter's tiny hand suddenly deform, turning into the grayish, ice-cold hand of a corpse. I was so scared, I dropped the baby onto the bed. Emily screamed in shock. I couldn't explain to my wife that Marcus had come. He took revenge by possessing my daughter's body. Tears fell onto the page. I didn't realize I was crying. I kept reading, even though I knew the truth being revealed would cause me great sorrow. I can't be near my child. Every time I see Maddie, I see Marcus in her. I see his smashed-in face on my daughter's face. I hear our mocking laughter and her cries. Emily doesn't understand. She thinks I'm going crazy. Maybe she's right. I have to leave. The last page, which my father wrote 3 weeks before I read this journal. Maddie is grown now. I sometimes secretly look at her pictures online through Emily's account. She's beautiful, like her mother. I'm happy to be able to see her normally and not see Marcus in her anymore. Marcus was never in Maddie. Marcus was only in me. I killed him. I destroyed my family. And now I'm alone with the ghost I created myself. I closed the journal, clutching it tight to my chest. Tears streamed down my face. The room was still dark and cold, but I no longer found it scary. I only found it lonely. A man who lived for over 20 years with ghosts in his head, unable to forgive himself and unable to live in happiness. My father didn't abandon me. He was a broken man, consumed by guilt every day. It was all sickness, hallucinations born from a tormented conscience. But to him, they were more real than anything. I imagined him quietly scrolling through my photos online, silently saving every moment without once daring to click like. A father who couldn't hold his child, couldn't call her name, could only watch from afar like a shadow, because inside him, Marcus had never died. I grieved for the father I never got to meet. I understood he had imprisoned himself in an invisible jail all his life and died in solitude.